Hey everyone, this is Kate from Moonflower Moments. Welcome and welcome back. Today I'm going to share with y'all a topic I have been ruminating over for about 6 months, and that is how tarot helps me to feel a personal sense of power, and the decks especially that over the course of the 6 months have made me feel the most powerful. So since I've been thinking about this topic for about 6 months, I was able to divide these decks into categories of how they make me feel powerful, like the function they play in my life in making me feel most powerful. So I'd like to go ahead and get started with the first category, which only has 2 decks into it, but they're both very important to my practice. And those are the decks that make me feel powerful because they remind me to be body present. So the first deck that I want to share with you in regards to this is one that gets a lot of airtime on my channel, and that would be the Radiant Wilds Tarot. And this is a deck that reminds me to stretch. Absolutely, this is a deck that reminds me to stretch, to take deep breaths, and to feel what it's like to exist within my body. So a lot of the figures that are depicted in some sort of like yoga pose or stretching, kind of moving their body. And it's a reminder to myself to come back home to myself, to really exist within the vessel of my body, and to get out and experience that movement. Especially during summer, this is very valuable to me because it gets so hot. It'll be like 90 degrees out, right? So I really have to pull from decks like this to remind me to go outside and get that exercise early in the morning, whether that be from weeding the garden or just like walking around in the neighborhood. Because then I get to spend the rest of my day really feeling present in that body. So this is my number 1 deck for really helping me to feel powerful through that body presence. But it's a deck that also makes me feel very powerful because all of these people are on the move, right? So they're making shit happen. And I find that to be very endearing and something that I can learn a lot from. Here we go, I'll stop there. So that was Radiant Wilds. The next deck that I would like to show that helps me to feel body present is definitely not safe for work. So if you're watching around children or you just don't want to see nudity, please go ahead and skip ahead. And that is going to be my Femme Erotiques. I've said before on my channel, and I'll go ahead and share it again, that this is a deck that I use at the start of every one of my menstrual cycles to remind me that even though I am in a lot of excruciating pain, that I do really enjoy the experience of being a woman. And I hope that language isn't exclusionary to people that are coming to womanhood from a different route, namely people that are non-binary or people that are trans. I hope it's also not exclusionary to the people who have very difficult periods, because I know that that is something that many women experience, or just irregular periods. I have a lot of family members and friends that have PCOS. And so I definitely don't want to exclude people from the table when I'm talking about that. But this is a deck that reminds me to just take care of my body, right? Because everything is stripped back because these women are completely like naked clad. They have no clothes in sight. It's a reminder once again to come back home to myself and ask myself, what does this vessel need? And that typically is the question that I ask when I pull at the beginning of that cycle. Is what does my body need? What do I need in order to take care of my body? And I found that to be a very productive ritual in trying to give me that sense of autonomy back, right? Because when we are in pain, when we are fatigued, it's difficult for us to find the route out of that. And I'm not trying to downplay that at all, because I know that people have like very serious experiences with that. But I know that it helps me personally to feel a sense of power, to know that I have some options moving forward. And I think that this tarot, but tarot in general, helps to remind me of those options, and that I can make choices, such as, for example, like getting out a heating pad. Like a lot of times, like I forget to get out a heating pad, y'all. I just won't do it. Or drinking more water, or stretching, or choosing to say no to plans because I need a nap. This is a deck that I use for that purpose. So this is one of my body present decks for sure. Another way that I feel a personal sense of power is my rootedness to community. So this is like a little bit separate, but I think that this is still related. So we're about to take kind of like a giant tangent. And I want to share with you one of the decks that makes me most feel rooted to community, but kind of through an ancestral lens, and that would be Slavic legends. So I can't claim exactly Slavic heritage. My husband definitely can. His mother is 100% reigning from this region. But my grandmother did grow up in Germany, and I do recognize that that is completely different, completely different culture, completely different region. But I have been vying for a German-based deck for years. I haven't really found anything that really fits, but this is a deck that is full of artwork that is very similar to the artwork that was displayed in my grandmother's house. And a lot of the stories and the folk tales that she used to tell us when I was growing up, a lot of the themes and a lot of the depictions that come through in this deck are very similar to that. My grandmother definitely grew up in rural Germany, very far away in a little village in southern Germany. And so the fact that this deck is continually reinforced by nature reminds me of my ancestral roots to her. And that definitely helps me to feel that sense of power, because I feel like she is right there next to me on my side. And that part of my lineage is represented through my experiences with these decks. And just the concept that, like, very recently in my heritage, I did have someone that grew up with a very strong nature-based connection to community. And so it reinforces to me how I exist in the world, how I engage with nature, and how I do feel that nature's power surge in me. See, like, this is very similar to how my grandmother had people like dolls. I say people. It's kind of weird that I just said people were dolls, but how she had dolls that were dressed. A lot of them would wear these aprons like this and these scarves around their head. So this is very traditional fashion for what I saw depicted in like her dolls and her artwork. It's just very warm and sweet. This is a deck that also makes me feel very powerful because of its extremely high contrast. It's a deck that reminds me to notice the high contrast of the world around me and to lean into that. I think it's one of the prettiest decks in my collection. So this one gives me a sense of personal power because it roots me to my ancestral community. And that was Slavic legends. Next is similar but different. This really has nothing to do with my heritage whatsoever, but this is the Witch Sisters. And even though this is not based in like my own cultural traditions at all, this is a deck that gives me a sense of personal power. One, because it is so absolute badass. Like, the women depicted here have such like a gritty kind of urgency to them and such a feeling of like resilience and resistance. But also because this is a deck called Witch Sisters, right? So it absolutely depicts a particular community. And when I was falling into a new friend group, and I say falling in because like I think all of the pieces had to kind of fall in place for me to kind of move into this friend group and to fully be present in it. This is a deck that I used a lot to help me kind of suss out what my role would be within that community, because they are an incredible like set of like badass women. And I just wanted to know for myself, like, what role do I play in that? You know, how can I give back to them? What will they give me in return? And kind of the trajectory of getting to sit in a community of women that are very deeply self-reflective and deeply motivated to get shit done. So this is a deck that reminds me of my rootedness to kind of like my friendships, I think, and the badass women around me that like don't let anything stop them. And that really feel the experience of being alive, because I think that's part of power too, is allowing yourself to feel all of the experiences that are present and not run from it, but like face it head on, kind of like she is. So this was Witch Sisters. Another deck that of course makes me feel very rooted to my community is going to be a new favorite of mine, and that is Louisiana Cajun Creole Tarot by Cajun Conjurer. The person who made this deck grew up in the community that I am living in now and working in now. So this is extremely reflective, not only in Louisiana as a whole, but also the community that I'm choosing to spend the rest of my life in. This is a deck that follows the historical history of Louisiana. So these are the Acadians who were exiled and moved to Louisiana for refuge. It also shows some more modern depictions. So for example, this is the Accordions. This looks like someone who is a modern Louisiana. It looks like he is in, let's see, Pont-Bro. Yeah, here we go. So it looks like he's playing in a music festival, which is a current tradition. We also have the civil rights movement, which is depicted with the swords. Let me see if I can find that. You always like can see the swords until you try to find them. Here we go. The triangles. Yep. So this is depicted in Louisiana civil rights movement. So there are historical nods to the beauty of this place and the struggles of this place, but then also really like modern depictions too. So I really love the fact that it kind of traverses time, and it gives me that sense of community, but it gives me that sense of idea that like not only are the people who currently exist behind my back, because I do have a lot of people in the community that support me and it reminds me of them, and to be like a full-bodied like community member for them. But I also have all of the ancestral roots here as well. And all of the people that came before me, all of the spirits of place that came before me. It's a deck that reminds me of how much I love this community. And I think that that's like at the core of our power, right? Is the concept of we have to remember our purpose. And I do feel like I have a lot of purpose and I have a lot of things to give back to this place. So it makes me feel powerful, because it's kind of that concept of like, because I feel purpose, I feel the power that I need in order to participate here and be an active member and to get shit done for like the welfare of my community. So this was the Louisiana Cajun Creole Tarot. Here we go. And I absolutely love blue heron, so I will stop here. I'm hoping to get a tattoo of this on my left thigh, probably in the next couple of years. All right, so we've gone through body presence. We've also gone through rooted to community. I want to talk about the decks that make me feel really badass because they help support my sense of autonomy. So these are the decks that remind me of the feeling that I got the very first time that I read tarot. You know, the first time that you sit down to read and then you get a reading that is absolutely accurate, and you know that tarot is going to be a system that changes your life for the rest of your life, right? So I want you to imagine that feeling that sits inside of your gut, that sense of knowing, that sense of your intuition kind of being sparked on fire. And these are the decks that really make me feel that way. So I'm going to go ahead and start with the Barbara Walker Tarot. I actually have this one in a tin because I put it away for a little while. Barbara Walker was a little bit too mean for me. So I decided that I would put her in my car just in case I ever needed a car tarot, which is crazy because I always keep a purse tarot. So I don't know, like, I think it was my version of purgatory. Is like, I need you out of my house for a little while. I'm gonna hold her up because she's so small. And recently I actually started to have a dream about this deck and like using this deck. So I was like, I think I need to come back to it. And for the last few weeks, this is one that has really reinforced my sense of power. This deck is very witchy. This deck is very blunt. This deck is very direct. And this is a deck that makes me feel powerful because I feel like when I work with it, I'm able to be in a position to receive divine knowledge, right? So I know that there's a couple different interpretations of the Eight of Wands, and I know I'm looking at the Nine of Swords here. I'm just going to flip through the cards while I talk. But one of the interpretations of the Eight of Wands is like the concept of like movement or things happening really quickly. But the way that I learned to read the card is like to receive divine guidance from above. So when I pull the Eight of Wands, I usually will pull a clarifier to see like what is trying to come from above for me. What is trying to come through through my spirit guides for me. And this deck kind of feels the same way. I feel like every time I read with it, I have to treat it with like a sense of reverence. But then it gives me a message that I'm able to carry with me throughout my life. It gives me that sense of knowing. It gives me that sense that like the spirit guide has directly delivered something to me to do something with. So this is a deck that supports my knowing. I consider it to be one that definitely like fosters my sense of intuition. And at the end of the day, it makes me feel very powerful because these images are very badass. It is a very feminist deck. I know there's a lot of controversy because some of the things that were written in the guidebook, like Barbara Walker did not cite her sources with. So she wasn't the strongest scholar. There's some allegations that she made up a couple of things. That's what I've heard people say. And I do get that. But like these women look badass and I want to be friends with them. So at the end of the day, I do definitely see the controversy of this deck. But it is very feminist in nature. And I think in that way, it does support that sense of like, I have control over my life. Sometimes I just need to sit down, pull some cards, and feel that message come through, to feel like I have autonomy over, you know, the Tower moments and the Five of Swords moments. So I can be that kind of King of Swords that is piecing together the puzzle and has that knowledge. All right, so this was the first deck that really supports kind of my sense of autonomy through the world. It makes me feel that power. The next one I want to share with you is a very lovely deck, the Totem Tarot. Now, Rachel White, who is the creator of this deck, recently lost her garden, which is a major source of her income, to a hailstorm in Austin. Like a really bad hailstorm. So if you're interested in purchasing this deck, I'm going to leave a link in the description box below, but it would be really nice, I think, to support a creator as she is like finding her way back up. So this is a fucking witchy deck, if there is one to ever be seen. Y'all know that I really love pip decks. I rightfully could have included Tarot Botanical in here too, but I decided to put it away and give it a little break for right now. But this is a deck that makes me like feel like, holy shit, like I am doing tarot, because it's a more advanced deck. The majors are clearly described in the guidebook. So it does explain like why Rachel chose these deities for all of the majors. But the minors are extremely pippish, right? And so it's like, it kind of makes you feel like a badass, because at the end of the day, like I know what the Four of Trees means or the Four of Wands means. But let's say you're reading for someone completely unfamiliar with tarot, right? And you pull this card and they're like, how the fuck did you get that meaning out of that, right? Because a lot of times people don't realize that tarot is based off of a system. So it kind of like adds to the woo of it, which is a little bit fun, makes you feel a little bit powerful, I'm not gonna lie. But also there's the concept of allowing my intuition to reign free. So this is the Four of Wands, right? We've built that absolute structure and we have like this box surrounding it. Because you can see actually in this corner here that there's like a little bit of a gap. Like it still is enclosed, but this twig here on the side looks like it's about to break, or that it could break. It looks a little bit like stiff, like really tense. So it's a concept of, as you are building this structure, you know, make sure to reinforce the parts that are tense in your life too, the parts that need urgent care. And so I'm able to allow my intuition to flow with this. And I think that that's a massive part of my understanding of personal power as well. Like, do I trust myself enough to look at what other people would see as nonsense, right? Not that this deck is nonsense by any means, but something that is very abstract that the layperson wouldn't be able to understand. Am I able to look at this very bare bones image of a card and construct meaning, but then also to trust myself enough that the message that's coming through is the one that I need to hear? Or perhaps the client needs to hear. You know, that does take a huge kind of investment into your sense of understanding of tarot, but also like it reinforces your sense of power, because it's like, yeah, damn right, I do trust myself enough to read that this is the Seven of Wands. And to make the interpretation that, you know, we're doing all of this fighting above here, you can actually see maybe perhaps these arms. There's a lot of action going on here, but it seems like there's not a lot going on down here with this fadedness. So I almost imagine like a person like standing on a ground, typical to the usual like Seven of Wands. And they're moving their arms and they're kind of flailing about, but they only have one foot on the ground. And you can see that because it's like faded out like this. So like I said, it's a deck that reinforces my trust in my intuition, which therefore absolutely, absolutely helps contribute to my sense of power. And it's just beautiful. I'm going to read for some people today, and I think I'm going to bring this one with me. It's been a little while since I've used it. I've missed it. I have edged mine in black, and it looks awesome. So if you get it, I think it definitely looks good, edged in black. All right, so the next one we are going to look at is, I think, let's go ahead and do the Conjure Cards, because like this is kind of the section where we're feeling a little bit witchy, right? And I feel like the Conjure Cards are a beautiful depiction of that feeling. So I will confess wholeheartedly that I don't know yet. I don't know yet, but I will soon learn playing card divination. That is on my list of things to study for the summer. But I just like to use these cards in a very intuitive sense. So in the sense here, we have the Two of Diamonds. If If I were to pull this, we have the 4-leaf clover. We also have some money underneath it. So I would see this as like financial prosperity or new blessings coming in. Perhaps it wouldn't necessarily have to be money. I know that playing card divination is much more like literal, kind of similar to Lenormand. But if I was reading this with tarot, I would say like luck with receiving resources. I would kind of generalize that money to resources, or the ability to kind of like manage your situation in a way that you want, because specifically like luck has fallen on your side. And I think that that's like really cool, is that we can take this image and kind of like construct layers upon layers of meaning with it. I think once I learn the system, it'll unlock even more like badassery to me. But right now it's one that like I use solely to help me tap into that intuitive self. It looks witchy. It feels witchy. It feels very powerful. There is something like very badass about pulling out like a deck of playing cards and being like, let me fucking give you a reading right now with it. You know? I don't know. And it's pulling on the concept of like all of those traditional forms of divination as well. And so once again, it helps you kind of tap back into that rootedness of the ancestry of divination that I really appreciate. And there's a feeling when using these cards that because it does support my intuition so much, it gives me that sense that I do know, right? I know more than I can even like consciously be aware of. There's more that my intuition is aware of that than I am. I say that like my intuition is separate from me, but of course it's like another part of me. It's another muscle that I use. So this is another one that supports my personal power through kind of giving me that sense of, here I am, I'm doing a thing, and that thing is really cool. I don't know how else to say that, but I'm not going to edit that out. It's going to be what it's going to be. All right, another deck that helps me to feel powerful because it supports my knowing is going to be the spread deck, the Shadow Work Edition. I show this deck quite a bit because I use it all the time. This is one that regularly gets a lot of use on my channel. So these cards are meant to help you form spreads. And I actually like to kind of pull these cards at random most of the time when I'm reading for myself. And then I'll leave them flipped over. So like I'll pull like these cards and I'll leave them flipped over. And then I will just trust in the universe that whatever tarot cards I pull match them. I'll layer the tarot cards on top with the spread deck still flipped over. And then I'll read the tarot cards and sense my meaning from them. Then I'll flip over the spread cards and try to make connections between what I interpreted from tarot and what these cards are conveying. So that's the way that I tend to use this deck. And I like to do it that way, so that way I feel like these words are very specific, which is very good, but tarot is such a broad and expansive system that I kind of want to sense out what tarot says first, and then kind of like after I've gotten overwhelmed in the vastness of tarot, come back to a more like limiting clarifier to give me a better sense of that lens. I find that process to be really important, to be able to kind of sense everything out and see the whole picture before I kind of narrow in, so that way I don't lose the nuances of what tarot presents. So this is a deck that helps me to know more about myself, right? It's the Shadow Work Edition. This is how you heal. This is your inner battle. This is the root cause of what's going on. And what better way to feel powerful than to know ourselves so intimately and so deeply that we're able to work through the shit that we have in front of us. We're able to work through the shit that we have inside of us. I think that doing shadow work is the ultimate way that we can gain power, because it allows us not to run from the parts of us that we try to hide, or the parts that are not illuminated, but to really embrace all of ourselves. And if we don't like a part of it, to sit down and make a plan to do the hard work. And this is a deck that helps us to come up with that sense of plan, because if I were to pull, for example, wounds, right? This gives me direction on what I need to address, so that way I'm able to fix what needs to be fixed, and I can step into that personal sense of power. So this is a deck that reminds me of my autonomy, because I have choices to take action. I have choices to make shit happen instead of just willowing and wallowing there and kind of self-pity. So it does require like a lot from you, but I think that this is a deck that makes me feel that personal sense of power the most. All right, so once I've kind of felt body present, once I felt rooted to my community, once I've felt that sense of like personal autonomy that I get just from like the act of divination and shadow work itself, I want to tap into my personal power when I'm actually doing. So I'm labeling this as like manifestation decks, but I know that manifestation has like a very specific meaning and I'm perhaps not using it the way that it's intended, but these are my decks that help me to do. These are my action-based decks, the decks that make me take all of these lessons that I've learned, all the support that I've gotten through my community, the support that I've had through like existing and appreciating my body itself. And now like, what am I going to do to assert my power onto the world? So I'm looking up at the Emperor right now because I pulled him recently. And so I would consider these to be like my Emperor decks, right? The ones that help me take charge of my domain because I'm actually actively doing things. So one deck that I want to share with y'all, of course, is one of my favorites. And that's going to be my William Blake Tarot. This deck makes me feel like a badass. It absolutely does. I think William Blake was on the next level in the sense of like, he really was tapped into some divine shit. That was not my eloquent speech that I usually give, but like, I don't know. I feel like this is a deck that's tapped into something so much deeper and so raw, right? And part of that is too that like William Blake did the artwork for this. He didn't do the artwork for this. William Blake created artwork and wrote poetry. And then someone came by. Let's actually look at the guy's name. Let me make sure I call him right. Ed Vernon came and created a tarot deck with his understanding of tarot. So it is kind of a curated art deck in that way. But like I said, I think that the artwork and the poetry is on a next level. So this is a deck that I consider to be one of my Emperor decks, one of my doing decks, because it's a deck that is full with so much action. There's something so guttural about this deck that really spurs me to movement. I am someone who doesn't have a lot of fire in her chart. I think I only have like 13% fire, maybe even 8% fire. Literally, my Saturn is in Aries. And guys, if your Saturn is in Aries too, and you've already gone through a solar return, I would love to, not solar return, a Saturn return. I'm like in the midst of mine and I would love to hear your lessons if you just want to like drop that in the comments below. But like I said, only my Saturn is in Aries, that's it. The rest of me, like there's not a lot of fire. And so I need a deck that will tell me to get off my ass and go do shit. And that's what this deck feels like to me. We have so much movement. We have such grandiose ideas. We have expansiveness. We have people painting. Look at this tension that's in like the Hanged Man. There's a life force that runs underneath this deck that absolutely reminds me that like, I don't have to sit on my ass, right? Like I can go out and do things that are creative and inspiring and be that King of Wands that my cards keep telling me that I need to be. I do have a lot of earth in my chart, so it is my natural inclination to kind of like sit and ruminate and to experience like the oneness with the earth. And I think that while that's my natural inclination and that's beautiful and that's my primary form of spirituality, I do want to be known as someone who gets shit done, and not only gets shit done, but like perhaps maybe possibly inspires other people to do it too. So I know that I'm really kind of describing a felt experience and not so much of this deck. But I do hope that you get what I mean. It's beautiful. And as I've spoken about before in length, especially in my walkthrough of this deck, the guidebook does provide applications of how these cards can guide your creativity. So in the case of this, I know it has fire around the edge, but this is actually water. So it's the child of water. And it actually comes down here and it says, in the creative process, go inside yourself to experience emotional innocence and primal voice. Don't be afraid to improvise in your own way. So I love that. So, you know, it's like, there's no excuse, right? Because the guidebook is literally telling you what to do. So get off your ass and like get shit done. And that's what this deck does for me. And reminds me that like I can get shit done. All right, so the next one that is in this category is going to be my Out of Hand Tarot. I actually have the King of Wands sitting on my altar space right behind me from this deck, because this was the deck that first like pointed out to me that I think I'm kind of shifting in my signifier from like the King of Wands, or sorry, the King of Cups to the King of Wands, or rather I'm being called upon at this time in my life to embrace those energies of the King of Wands. So this deck holds like a special place in my life because it's definitely part of like my current arc. But because all of the hands are featured here, it really reminds me of the things that I can do, right? A lot of times, like we do get stuck in that not Seven of Swords, the Eight of Swords mindset of feeling trapped and not really sure where to turn to. But when you pull from this deck, there is a reminder that like the power is literally in your hands to shape the world. The power is literally there at your fingertips to take charge, to move, to, once again, like I said before, quite eloquently put, get shit done. You know, we can make that choice to answer that call or to continue working on that assignment. It's up to us. And it shows so many different ways of doing, right? So in the case of the, let's go ahead and find some swords. A lot of the swords, well, actually, I'm going to talk about the wands. A lot of the wands have people doing like creative tasks. So you can see that this person has like carpal tunnel, probably from their experience with doing like graphic design. So it kind of like reminds us in the way of like how we can take charge in our vocations with wands, which is actually how I read wands all the time. I always think of wands associated with work. The Ace of Swords oftentimes has someone with a pen or a pencil or a paintbrush, reminding us of our ability to create via words. The Page has people with like a lot of different books and a lot of different resources, such as money. They're actually working with their like physical environment. And then what do we have left, guys? I guess we have the Cups. I might as well go talk about them since we're here. Where are the Cups? Here we go, the Cups. So this cup in particular, I mean, it does have someone working within the realms of this vessel. It looks like someone doing something that is emotionally fulfilling for them, such as the Four of Cups right now, just kind of kicking back and like sitting in those emotions of just relaxation and withdrawal. Yeah, here we go. The Three of Cups. So they definitely are emotionally driven. So like I said, it reminds me of all the different realms that I can do shit in, right? Like I don't have to let my life pass me by, but I can be an active participant, an active contributor to the building of my life. And that's what this deck really does reinforce at its like most base level. All right. And I think I have one more to share with y'all. And this is going to be a brand new one. I'm also going to consider this one to be one that helps me to be an active participant, helps me to do the things in my life and to take charge. And this is the Soul Trees Ascension deck. I just got this one. This is actually my newest deck. But I used it to read on my Instagram for Tarot Tuesday this week. And it sang like a charm. So the reason that I'm going to consider this like a doing deck is because many of the words are absolutely formatted as verbs, such as like holding back. We have a lot of nouns too, but here's another verb, align. Be receptive. I like the concept of be receptive. I was getting a lot of verbs yesterday. I'm looking for some more verbs. Prosper. There we go. We'll keep it there. So a lot of the verbs that are in this deck really make you feel like, okay, yes, I got it. Every time I would read with this deck and a verb would pop up, it was a very clear, insightful direction to this is what I need to be doing immediately within this circumstance. So it paired super well with tarot in that regard. And I think that there is a vastness of keywords here that reminds us of all of the different areas in which we can take charge in our life. So for example, self-care. Like, have you ever seen a tarot deck that has self-care as a word? Like, I know there's self-care centered tarot decks, but I've never seen it displayed as like a keyword. And I really like this, like, a lot. Because it is an area that we can take charge in. Going within is an area that we can take charge in. Our creativity is an area we can take charge in. So there is such a vast spectrum of ideas here that it's not so like narrow that we're using the deck for like one specific purpose, right? But we can use it in a way that is very versatile to remind us of all of the different realms that we do have control over. I'm gonna stop right there at liberation because I think that's the perfect word to sum this deck up. It's a liberating deck, and that it gives us options of how to take control. All right, so I think that is all that I have to share here. And I think throughout this journey, I've really learned for myself what personal power means to me, kind of through the reflection of these categories. But I also wanted to share with y'all today a daily draw that I pulled that I think definitely defines personal power to me. So these are the two cards that I pulled this morning, and I think that this is how tarot makes me feel personal power the most. So similarly to the decks that I described that help me to see kind of the breadth of the issue, such as, for example, the Soul Tree's Ascension and all of the different nuances of the issue, the mushrooms here are essentially decomposing this log, right? And they are breaking it down into its finest little parts to give the sense that anything and everything can be analyzed, right? And that's what tarot offers us, is the opportunity to break things into bits so that we're able to feel an opportunity to not be so overwhelmed, to see things for its parts, to step in and take that personal power. And that interplay is really nice with the Empress. I do have to say, on a personal note, I was super excited that I got the Empress along with Tower, because if you're ever going to receive the Tower, I feel like having the Empress right next to it to rebuild is something that is so validating and something that is so reassuring. But this Empress is the one that takes this blank slate, right? The mushrooms have completely taken over this log. There's really nothing left at the end of the forest floor of substance. Everything has been broken to bits. And the Empress moves into that blank slate, and she's someone who, through her connection to community, because she is a community leader, is able to work with community to rebuild from that slate. And that's very similar to what the decks that remind me of my community purpose is. Because through my community, I feel power, just like this Empress does, to create and recreate. The Empress is very body present. She's very confident in her body. She's very sensual in that nature, and that in itself gives her the constant reminders that like she is worthy of doing this work. But the Empress is also the ultimate manifester, right? So I think we have here like the story of how tarot can give people a sense of power, but in particular how it plays out in my life as well. So I thought this was really fitting for my daily draw for today. It's actually the reason I decided to film this video, because I felt like this was kind of a nudge to the universe to put these ideas out here. So with that being said, I want to throw it back at you guys. So what are the ways that tarot makes you feel powerful? Would you agree with some of the categories that I listed? Or are there other ways that tarot helps you to divine your sense, to develop your sense of power and to feel just full and rich and kind of present and powerful in your life? So I hope that y'all have a beautiful day. Thank y'all so much for watching, and I will see y'all again next time.